Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seat. We are ready to start to the afternoon session. Stefan, Ronig? Okay, the next presentation is on the environment, privacy, data protection and security by Stefan Ronig.
Yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will try to give you in a quite brief presentation, in much less than 50 minutes, some details and maybe mainly the question why and how we deal with environment, privacy, data protection and security. So the first question is why. Of course, these topics, these issues, privacy, security, environmental protection, are a huge concern for the general public, for a lot of European citizens. And this is also converted into the discussion on the basic regulation. So the new basic regulation for EASA is expected to contain quite some elements on environment as usual, but also on privacy, data protection and security. And I just put here on the slide the Council proposal from December 2016, which is quite sure not the final language on these issues, detailing essential requirements for unmanned aircraft operation. So there will be requirements on the operator to be aware and to comply with regulations, but there will also be requirements on the aircraft, on the device, to deal with privacy, protection of personal data, security and environment. First topic, environment. How do we address environmental protection in the NPA? We do it on several layers. One is the operational element. So we have a requirement in the UAS spec and open part. It's requirement 30, where the operator and the pilot are required to respect other people's fundamental rights and operate the unmanned aircraft in a considered way to minimize nuisance to other people due to noise emissions. So they have the obligation to respect other people in that content. We have also technical requirements. So we have in the product requirements on the drones a maximum noise level, so sound power level not exceeding 80 decibel, measured at 3 meter distance, which is equivalent to other machinery directives where we have similar issues. We have also provisions in the areas where the member state may designate areas where the aircraft is shall comply with specified environmental standards. We have not yet started to address what kind of standards this could be, but as we talk about the European environment, this could, for example, be something similar to a European eco-label, which is used in similar other areas. We also want to contribute to, or are requested, and we want to contribute to security and privacy in the regulations. So one tool we provide is registration. So except very small drones with less than 250 grams, all operators must register. And for security consideration, the UAS operator must also register the aircraft when it's heavier than 900 grams. We have the electronic identification requirement. This is a functionality required for Class C1 when equipped with a high resolution camera, which is currently defined as 5 megapixel camera, and a real-time transmission, or when it's required for the zone of the operation. We also have the geofencing as one of the elements of the tools. So this is required for UAS in Class C2, or also when required for the zone. Also here, the member states have the freedom to define zones that are related to security or privacy. So when there's a need to protect sensitive infrastructure, persons, or anything for security reason, this can be used or can justify that access to a certain area of operation is limited. Like for all the other risks, we propose a mix of mitigation. So it's not one mitigation that provides a waterproof mitigation, whatever is done. It's a mixture, and they complement each other. So we have operational limitations which support privacy security. We address the topic in pilot competence and training. The pilots need to be aware of the subject. We have product requirements related to this, functionalities like geofencing, electronic identification, but also very important are safety promotion, awareness raising on these subjects, and enforcement, which is supported by, for example, electronic identification. One element on security is we have the definition of zones, which is probably one of the most robust elements here. Zones can be defined where certain operations are not permitted without prior authorization or not permitted at all. No drone zones in general language. Or where it's only access is only permitted when the aircraft is equipped with electronic identification and geofencing. So this is probably the second layer around a real no drone zone to ensure that there is an awareness of operation in this area. And that's what's the intent. These elements support first, of course, the protection of sensitive areas, but also improve the situational awareness of the legal and authorized traffic around, so that it's easier to detect suspicious operation or non-compliant operation, which seems to be one of the main concerns of security agencies, to be able to identify the persons that should not, or the aircraft that should not be there. Privacy and data collection, it's also addressed. We had in the pilot competence, we have requirements on the knowledge, also of relevant European security and privacy data protection regulations. We have also a leaflet, which is on the one hand improving the awareness, on the other hand it's a technical requirement on the product, so every product comes with a leaflet. And we have the guidance material and UAS spec open for these topics. Technical, we have the electronic identification, and this is first, and it's not prohibiting operation, which is of aircraft that are equipped with high-resolution cameras, but it's putting a small burden on top of them, as they have to operate drones which have these features, which have this electronic identification that supports privacy rights and law enforcement. It's a complex environment. To be very brief, we have a lot of regulations that are applicable in that context. Collection, storage, processing of personal data is framed by European regulation or the European Data Protection Directive and national data protection laws. This is, of course, fully applicable to drone operators using audiovisual electronic sensors and that may record personal data. There are quite some principles, general principles that apply to these operators, especially to commercial operators. It needs to be necessary and proportionate to record the data. Additional regulation apply in case of publication of material, copyright, protection of images of the individuals. And one aspect that we should not forget is, of course, also the operator of a drone has rights. So also the registry, identification, tracking capabilities of any systems need to be proportionate and collect and provide only data that is necessary for the purpose. Very brief conclusion. Security, privacy, environment are key to public acceptance. A lot of persons we talk to are less concerned by safety, but they are concerned by intrusion of their privacy, by having drones flying with the camera close to them. So it's key to public acceptance. We have a lot of discussions on this topic. We are in contact with security and privacy specialists. For example, the Counter UAV Pioneer Group, data protection officers. So we get a lot of feedback, and we expect also in this consultation quite some feedback. And we address security and privacy in the NPA, but we also encourage you to have discussions to have an exchange of information between safety, security, privacy experts in your organization, in your member state, to provide a coordinated position to the NPA. We get a lot of inconsistent comments from some countries, depending who is asked, and there are of course different objectives for security and privacy. We believe that we propose, or that we have a balanced proposal here that enables enforcement and supports these topics. But any comment on this topic is welcome. Thank you.
So we don't have really questions on Slido dedicated to security, so I would say that we can go and ask to the floor if there are questions.
Thank you. Nice to know that I beat Slido this time. My question's relating to the registration process. Would a drone purchaser be able to fly the drone before he registers, or would he receive through the registration process some code to activate his drone? The second question, also relating to the operation of drones, you had mentioned, or in the earlier presentations it was mentioned that there is an online test. Would there be a certificate that is issued following the test, or how would that be conducted? Thank you.
Okay, I take the first question. For the lower classes, in theory, it's probably possible to operate without registering, which is not the intention, but there might not be a technical limitation that stops the operation. For electronic identification, which is also linked somehow to a registration, this could be included into the system. That of course, the electronic identification needs to know what it should transmit, what is the registration, and there's a clear link. And electronic identification will quite sure not work when there's no registration behind.
So for the second question on the online training, at the end of the process, there will be a sort of certificate that will be registered in the database, where all the information about you, about the operator, are stored. So in this way, the enforcement authority will know that you have passed the test.
Hi, Juan Luna from the Spanish Aviation Authority. Here. First of all, I don't know if it's a question or rather an observation, but at the same time you say there are now lots of rules concerning privacy, data protection. I don't see why EASA is now entering into that, provided that it doesn't really have anything to do with aviation safety, as the colleague before remarked. So I just don't see it. And regarding security, everything is based now, what you're presenting, on concepts, because to me there are still concepts that are not really clearly defined or developed, as the geofencing, for example, the e-registration, the electronic registration, since I don't know how the authorities are supposed to monitor who is really the person flying the drone through the drone. So all those things need to be developed probably before this enters into force. I don't know if you see the same way.
On the first part, as I presented in the first slide, we have to address the topics and to support, but we don't want to change the legal framework on security and privacy, which is not under the European or EASA scope in that context. So, but what we are asked to do, and where we have a clear mandate, and this might even go more into more prescriptive and detailed elements on the basic regulation, is that we support it, that we increase awareness of the operators, that we include it into the training, and that we have means like identification and registration, which is supporting this. So there's a clear need to go that way.
Hello, Sander Starreveld, Drone Flight Academy. I'm both the owner of Drone Flight Academy and an active pilot in the manned aviation. Can you confirm that EASA is pursuing the drone training and the drone examination of pilots in the same way as it's doing in part FCL? So with other means, will there be authorized entities performing the training, either online or in classroom, and will there be qualified entities examining the drone pilots? Are you seeking a common line with part FCL, as in manned aviation, or are you going to do the online training yourself as EASA, which is not clear to me?
We definitely don't want to go the way of manned aviation to issue a license according FCL for the open category. So we don't want to have this level of authority involvement in the open category. But there will be another presentation on the role of the member states, on how far the oversight and authorization of providers for training goes.
Hello, it's me. So good afternoon, everybody. It's Manfred Mohr from IATA. I was more looking for the safety for the next presentation, but I was not sure. But I can grab the microphone. You don't give it to me. It's a joke. So security, as you can imagine, is for our airlines. We are the grandpas and grandmas of this industry. It's very important, and to make sure that our view is a little bit heard and attended, we are very keen to have our role on cybersecurity as well. And I'm a great believer in education, in training and communication. This is, I think, the key. Talking that, cybersecurity means that somebody is doing it from RPAS, from remote. So you can imagine he's not on board. He's flying his wonderful UAV from external point of view, and he is maybe in a good mood, he's doing well, and the electronic is working well, and the geofencing is working, everything is fantastic. My question, are you aware about the situation in Hamburg this week? because we have a big task force. I'm not allowed to talk details. There's a big task force for to protect Mr. Putin and Mr. Trump, fake Trump, yeah, Trump, yeah, and somebody else. And I hope that we can learn, because they are at the moment in Hamburg, they are not shooting the drones, but what they are doing is they are sending out a signal to protect the Hamburg Fuhlsbüttel airport, and even the alternate. And I think it's a very good learning exercise, maybe for all of us, to not against any kind of unmanned vehicles. I have some projects running at my school for my daughters. I'm a big believer in all these projects, but to make sure that our passengers, and you will fly home later on with one of our airlines, I hope so, maybe with a train as well, okay. But I'm a big believer again in communication, information, and sharing of information. Can we learn from these kind of task forces? This is my question about cybersecurity and later on safety as well. Is it possible to learn from them? Is it allowed? Do you like this idea to learn and to share information between all of us? Thank you.
I think I can confirm for all of us that at least we believe we have the ability to learn. We share information as much as possible. We have a lot of contacts with all kind of groups, so we try to collect information, data, experience, and feed it into the development of the regulations. And as you mentioned, in these aspects, of course, awareness, education is a key element to make the public aware what they're doing. And I'm quite sure that Hamburg these days is a no-drone zone. It's out of my remit, but I would expect this. The problem is, as you mentioned, more to make the public aware what they can do, what they cannot do, if they can use a football or a drone or another toy. That's something we have to, this information we have to bring to the users. And I think the leaflets, the online training and safety promotion, which should also include security, environment, of course, is key element in these aspects. Counter UAV measures are out of the scope of this project. I know it's impressive what's presented there from time to time, and how far it can interact with flying objects, especially when the manufacturers cooperate and open the door to allow that enforcement entities or aerodrome operators protect these areas. But we are not yet in a way to mandate anything in this respect. But it might be a very powerful tool for aerodrome operators today or in the future.
Okay, thank you. So now we move to the next topic, the operation in the specific category, and done by Antonio Marchetto.
Thank you, Natale. Okay, so let's go through the presentation. Does it work? Okay. So, first of all, an overview of the specific category. We have Article 5, which gives an introduction, and then the part US subpart B, which is very detailed on the specific category. The main element, you see them there: risk assessment, standard scenarios, which can be low risk and high risk, as we will see later, with leading to a declaration or an authorization process. Mutual recognition and the light operator certificate. Mutual recognition and look will not be addressed by the presentation, but later. So these elements are linked to the interaction among three main actors, which are the operator, the remote pilot, and the competent authority. Article 6 and 7, you see it on the right, are dedicated to the designation and responsibility of the competent authority. I just extracted one of the requirements listed in this Article 6 and 7, and it is that the competent authorities must issue, register, maintain, amend, suspend, limit, or revoke authorization or certificates required to carry out US operation in the specific category. This is a clear, basic, and main requirement that you will see listed in Article 6 and 7. About the other actors, operator and remote pilot, you see that the competent authority is not linked to the remote pilot, of course, but if the operator and the remote pilot are the same, in that case the competent authority will be linked. You see there just a few of what is reported in subpart B, a few requirements. So the requirements for the operator are more linked to an organization, like registration, display of the registration, development on policy of procedure for the operation, and the designation of remote pilot for each operation, so on and so forth. About remote pilot, they are more linked to the flight, and of course have appropriate competence, obtain updated information about flight restriction and conditions, ensure the operating environment is appropriate to what the authorization includes, and so on. So the specific category is centered on the very important concept of operational authorization based on a risk assessment. In order to be able to carry out the operation, the operator must have an authorization as a baseline. And in order to obtain the authorization, the operation must give evidence that the risk mitigation factor associated to that operation and considered necessary to bring the global risk level to a level deemed acceptable have been put in place. You see there the interaction depicted between the operator and the competent authority, and finally, the operator authorization that is issued by the competent authority. So the risk assessment is carried out with a methodology referenced by the NPA in an AMC, which is the JAROS SORA Specific Operation Risk Assessment, a methodology being carried out by Working Group 6 of JAROS. In a few words, and we will see it later in more detail, the SORA identifies the risk mitigation factors that have to be put in place in order that the global risk of an operation, air risk plus ground risk, is taken to a level deemed acceptable. But let's look at it in a more detailed way, with this picture taken actually from the SORA. So on the left you see the concept of operation. So mainly the description, detailed description of the operation and of the US supposed to carry out the operation. So all of these feeds into the gray box in the middle, which is actually the risk assessment. You see there ground risk and air risk. Of course, a US carries always with it, with the operation, ground risk, possibility to harm people on ground, and an air risk, possibility to collide with other aircraft. In order for ground risk and air risk to be present, what needs to happen is an hazardous event. Now, with the holistic approach of the SORA, there is one hazardous event, which is the US operations out of control. Now, this statement must not be taken with the usual meaning of an aircraft being out of control, but as a definition, US operation out of control means that the US in some moment is being operated outside of the established CONOPS. So for example, if the operation is supposed to be carried out in visual line of sight, and in some time the aircraft is not in visual line of sight, that is a US operation out of control in those moments. Okay? So if that hazardous event happens, and therefore we have some ground risk and air risk, we have mitigation factors, harm barriers, to decrease the outcome of the event. Very simply, for ground risk, let's name a parachute, and for the air risk, let's name the operation in a restricted, segregated airspace. All of this is considered there because all of this leads to the SAIL determination, the specific assurance integrity level. It is a score that defines the level of residual risk, and that the lower it is, the less stricter can the threat barrier be. The threat barriers are the one that you see on the right, and they are the actual SORA output. And just as they are the threat barriers dedicated really to avoid that the hazardous event takes place. So there is really a big difference between the harm barriers, which happens after, and the threat barriers, which are dedicated to avoid in first place that the hazardous event takes place. Typical, for example, as a threat barrier, it's a US well-designed and well-produced. or an operator which is a pilot well prepared, an operator well organized, in a few words. So the SORA, very important document, is planned to be available with adequate maturity by end of this year. Now, the importance of the SORA is, in fact, in particular, with reference to standard scenarios. This is our next area of work. And why standard scenarios? They need to facilitate the task of the operators, and they are needed to promote operation in a specific category. You've seen the SORA. It might be not so easy to go through all the steps of the SORA. So what we want to do is to define standard scenario, which means the SORA has already been run. The risk assessment has already been carried out. So there is a CONOPS, very well defined, and a set of harm barriers and threat barriers. You take the standard scenario with the documentation attached, and you see already what needs to be put in place. So you don't have to go through the risk assessment process again. There are low risk and high risk standard scenarios, as we will see later. Very important, the operator of the US is responsible for staying within the operational and technical limits defined in the standard scenarios. Any deviation leads to non-compliance. These slides will present you some elements, including the standard scenarios. In a way, it recalls also the slide before about with the graph of the SORA. So, CONOPS on the left and mitigation on the right. For example, operational scenario for ground risk. You describe it as, for example, visual line of sight over populated environment, or beyond visual line of sight over a populated environment. For the air risk, you can have a definition like operation within class G airspace above or below 500 feet, over urban environment, or on rural environment. You may wonder that it is there, but the SORA recognizes that it is more probable to have a high density of aircraft where you have urban environment than rural environment. Then we go to the mitigation, harm barriers. I mentioned before the parachute, but for example, an emergency response plan. Harm barriers for air risk, restriction by time, for example, you fly only by night or in a restricted airspace, as I said before, in a segregated airspace. Then we have the technical mitigation and the threat barriers. Technical mitigation are a little bit to see with the threat barriers. Technical mitigation can be see and avoid, detect and avoid, or ground-based sense and avoid, which are dedicated to prevent the hazardous event from taking place. And then there are the properly set threat barriers, which you have some example there. Technical aspects of the UAS, manufactured by proven organization, as I said, developed to authority recognized standards, and so on. Human error and adverse operating conditions. So you will see all these in the SORA. Now, all the elements resulting from having pre-run the scenario on the SORA, this is clear. But we have also to remind that any mitigation that you see there can be required with a different level of integrity. You see it stated in the SORA, which can be low, medium, or high. Now, how does the standard scenario work? Let's take this. An operator imagines an operation, very broadly described as you see there. I will not go through the steps, it's not so relevant. But he recognizes that on the top you see the published low and higher risk standard scenario by the agency, the green and the yellow. He recognizes that the operation can be reflected by, for example, that low risk standard scenario. So the step 2 is examining the published standard scenario and identifying, in fact, that it reflects what he wants to do. Now, the steps are, the operator adapts to the CONOPS or the standard scenarios and put in place the mitigation measures stated in the standard scenarios. Then he declares, because it's a low-risk standard scenario, and sign, and there is a responsibility that the scenario mitigation measure match of the standard scenario. Competent authorities verify the declaration, but immediately the operator can carry out the operation. For a high-risk standard scenario, the methodology is the same. What is different? Let's go a little bit quicker. It's that in this case, the competent authority must release explicitly the operational authorization looking at the documentation. Now, some example of ongoing activity of standard scenarios, or link with them. We mentioned here JAROS working group C is working on beyond visual line of sight linear inspection and precision agriculture, two standard scenarios. And you see from the plan that they will be available for internal consultation in October this year. Another source is the UVSI survey and drone operations. And you see there the link to the survey. And the survey is in particular, I catch some picture of what is published in the website, but you see in particular identify market sectors and focus in particular on very low level beyond visual line of sight, but also beyond visual line of sight above 500 feet. So we want to see really where the action is going to take place, and this will give us, will help us to have a very good picture of what the priorities are in terms of standard scenario, where operators would like to operate now in a short time from now and in the far future. I'm trying here. Then eventually, COES is the Confederation of European Security Services, and there is a published paper on the web. You see in particular, as a result, risk assessment should rather cover types of operation, building, surveillance, event security, rather than each and every occurrence. So this is a very good representation of what a standard scenario, not each and every occurrence, but a type of operation. So we could have standard scenario linked to security. Upcoming work on standard scenario. So we intend to carry out a rulemaking activity in a standard scenario, including risk assessment method used to derive them, and this will be done end 2017, start 2018. Initially, we will have a few standard scenarios to be addressed. You've seen those of JAROS, the two ones, perceived as high priority ones. So the activities include, as I said, the JAROS one, for sure, then a selection of other high priority scenarios with the sources which we mentioned before and others, which qualify to become standard scenarios, and definition of concept operation with the adequate detail. So we will do it by means of dedicated workshops, and the input will be national standard scenarios, but also proposed by organization. And so far we have seen some good promises from the UVSI survey and COES, but there will be not the only one. And then carry out the risk assessment of the selected high priority standard scenarios. Gradually, we will increase the number of the standard scenarios. Finally, we want just to remember that we have an Article 11 on the that we allows the use of alternative means of compliance. So all of what I explained is the standard way of proceeding, the basic methodology, the so on and so on. But let's remember also the presence of Article 11 about allowing alternative means of compliance. So, okay, so it was the last slide. Thank you.
We have some question on the slide. Maybe the one highlighted.
So when we will see the final SORA of JAROS, and how will it be adopted by EASA? Okay. The final SORA, as I have in a slide, the SORA is available now. As you find it on the internet now, it's already in a form. And Lorenzo, who is here somewhere, probably can confirm. Lorenzo Mosilli is the leader of Working Group 6. So Lorenzo, hi. What I wanted to say, if you agree, is that the SORA, as it is now in the internet, is already usable by organizations which are competent on the matter. And so it will be improved. It will be made available in an even better form shortly, but as it is today, is already I would define it operational way.
Okay, thank you. We have another question on how we'll use the JAROS SORA.
Will EASA take ownership of the JAROS SORA and subsequently issue SORA and the EASA document instead of referring to the JAROS SORA? So the JAROS SORA will be adopted as a means of compliance. In this way will be, let's say, it's the ownership can be described. It will be a means of compliance, and I think it will be it will become officially our proposed means of compliance by means of these rule-making activities that I mentioned before. Okay, that's it.
Thank you. Okay, now we can open a question for the floor.
Peter.
Please wait for the microphone.
Thank you. In what languages will the SORA be available? Because if we want to make use of this, it's definitely not going to be only English. So the first question is what languages? The second question is when?
When the SORA, I repeat, is available now in a usable way. If the question is when it will be translated in other languages, Yves, can you?
I think we have, well, the SORA being the means of compliance, I think we have no obligation to translate. Now, I understand the reason of your question, and I think we probably would try to discuss with our member state to get some help on there, to make translation, or if there are also entities that would be ready to assist, I think it would not be refused. I mean, so we are. I think it's a very valid point. I think we need to take it under consideration. Then I cannot answer to your question when. We need to discuss and see who could help us to make the document also good in the national language, because sometimes translation are what they are. So that's my answer, Peter. It's not a complete answer, but yes, point taken into account, and we will discuss with our member state to see how could help us on this activity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anders Martinson from US Norway. Question regarding insurance. Is it correct that EC 785/2004 will not be applicable? If no, will there be other alternatives for insurance that will apply?
We have not addressed insurance in our rule, because that's something for which we are not competent. We have no mandate at all. Someone made the comment this morning that we have nevertheless mentioned it into the leaflets, because we know that national authorities are asking, or member states are asking for insurance. I think this is a very right thing to do. We simply cannot. We don't have the legal power to discuss that, and I think discussion, if we need to modify the existing regulation, I have no answer to that. I see that our colleagues from the Commission are one is coming to the rescue. Thank you.
Thank you, but it's more for my colleague from DG Move. There is a regulation, I don't remember, I do not remember, no, but I made a study. I do not remember the number of the regulation, but this, exactly, 785. This applies. This applies to drones because they are aircraft. The only gray zone was what could be covered under the wording model aircraft. But in any case, for professional drones, it certainly applies. The question whether we need to adapt it was the subject of a study I mandated 2 or 3 years ago, and you can find on our website. Probably in the future, we might eventually think to have a new look. At that time, it was clear that a revision was not necessary first, because just the mere fact that this obligation exists makes the operator aware that he has an obligation to take an insurance, and the level of insurance was much higher that was mandated by this regulation. This regulation basically mandates very low level of coverage. And normally operator, from the study we did at that time, showed that they were already taking more. In addition, it is true that the regulation has different level of requirement depending of weight of the aircraft. And basically the low level, I think, is 500 kilogram, which means that all drones would fall under the lower category. But we had no other and more precise information to refine these requirements. It is based on the mass why the risk in the drone business is on the operation. So it makes very difficult to change the regulation. It was at that time not obvious that it was necessary because operator took into consideration the obligation which falls on them to be insured. We may, or DigiMove may decide in the future to have a new look to the regulation, but I think at the moment the obligation is there and it's enough.
Okay, thank you.
Please, Lorenzo, want to make a...
Just a small, to be super precise on the availability of the SORA, just not to give people, I will go on the JARUS website. And so the SORA will be available in its final, let's say, issue 1 release, if the JARUS member states vote for it, which is currently ongoing, by the 25th of July. What is being currently publicated and going around was the external consultation version, which of course will be changed. So let's say by the end of July, you will have the SORA issue 1 with 2 of the annexes on the JARUS website. The plan then is to develop all the other annexes that are, of course, useful and needed to complete the SORA in a standardized way, and to publish them for JARUS internal consultation by, let's say, the end of this year, which means it will be available to all the NAAs, and then from them on, continue the application. So this is really our timeline at the moment. And just to make sure you don't go now on the JARUS website looking for the final one, which is still not there. We need 2 weeks more, and then maybe it will be there if they all sign and agree.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
so
you.
while Antonio, in the meantime, can you answer to the question, will SORA exclude the national risk assessment methodologies in the nearby future? Any other impact to take into account in relation with EU national regulations?
No, the SORA does not exclude national risk assessment methodology. In fact, the reference to the ALT MOC is there also for that reason. So there is the possibility for other kind of national risk assessment. Of course, they have to be accepted if an operator puts them in place by the competent authority.
Okay, thank you. So we have a last question from...
It's on to me. It's Jerry again. Back to insurance, I'm afraid. I'm sorry that I partially disagree with some of your response. I do have some concerns about Regulation 785/2004, really because of the way it's phrased. It says that it doesn't apply to model aircraft with a mass of less than 20 kilograms. Bear in mind, there's no definition of model aircraft within that document. I agree it's 14 years old now. But also within the preamble to the MPA, you also go to great lengths to say how difficult it is to define model aircraft. So it's really difficult to understand where it does or doesn't apply. Jean-Pierre, you just mentioned that it applies to all professional drones, but again, that's not necessarily completely clear. We need a definitive statement from somebody somewhere to say what was meant by model aircraft within the insurance regulation, because otherwise potentially it could take it that if you say it's professionally operated, something of let's say less than 250 grams being professionally operated needs insurance, which we've already said the risk is minimal with that sort of operation. Similarly, that insurance regulation requires insurance coverage for war and terrorism, which I think when we're starting to deal with drones and things is completely unrealistic, because that insurance regulation was really developed for the post 9/11 scenario and bigger sort of aircraft. So I think that there is an element of clarity really needed there. Happy to get direction from the EC somewhere else as to what they mean, but to split it down into what you do and don't mean is quite difficult, I think. So just a big bid there, that there is a big hole there in the insurance thing. The final thing with that, of course, is that within the open category, the national aviation authorities have no involvement with the regulation or with dealing with drones at all. But of course, in, I suspect, a lot of countries, the National Aviation Authority is the competent authority for making sure that that insurance regulation is actually applied in the first place. So there's another disconnect that we can't sort out there. So I think it is building up to be a big problem within a lot of countries that needs to be addressed.
Okay.
Just, okay, thank you very much, Jerry. I think it's a very interesting point of view. I just asked my colleagues, and EC, it will not be EASA, but EC, they undertake that they will discuss within the Commission and obtain a clarification on those points. And I would probably record that as a sort of action coming from our discussions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now we move to the next topic, is Light Unmanned Certificate. Look, will be presented by Irina Petrova.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today I will walk you through our requirements, draft requirements on the Light Unmanned Operator Certificate, or LUC, the way you like it. So, that doesn't work? On the left side? Right? Okay, so you have already seen that some operations will require a authorization. So, authorization here, authorization there, authorization for a different member state. This may become very burdensome and costly for the operators. So therefore, we propose a solution to this to such situations, and we think that the Light Unmanned Operator Certificate will be a solution for large companies, or not that large companies, depending on the operation. What is LUC? LUC is a certificate, as I mentioned, and all requirements are contained in subpart C of Annex 1 to the draft rules. A LUC is an organizational concept, so only organization can apply, legal entities can apply, so individual pilots cannot apply for a LUC certificate. It's not mandatory, it's voluntary. This is the way we want to, one of the ways we want to promote a risk management practice and theory within the UA industry. The LUC will be granted to those organizations that have established safety management system. And the safety management system must be tailored to the size, the nature of the activities, and the complexity of the activities of the operator. So the applicant, the potential applicant, should demonstrate to the authority that he has a sound organizational management and culture in order to obtain the certificate. The application should include a description of this system, the name of the responsible person who will sign the authorizations, and a statement of compliance that all documentations has been verified and found in compliance with the requirements. In addition, the applicant will need to develop manuals. So the operation manual is mandatory, but also safety management manual. It can combine the parts related to safety management system and describe them in the operation manual. This is a flexibility. This is a choice. And the operator, the applicant, will have to fill the forms. We have not come up with forms yet, but in the future, in the near future, we will provide the forms in the AMC, at the level of AMC. So I will explain what is the safety management system looking for. So the operator must have a safety policy. This is very important. This is the Bible of the organization. It should be written in a way and should be made aware. Any employee of the operator should be made aware of the safety policy of the organization. The safety policy also serves to explain and promote the safety culture. The safety culture meaning that safety issues are reported, are investigated, and there is no, the aim is not to apportion blame. The aim is to improve safety. So the so-called no blame culture. The safety policy must be signed by the accountable manager, who is the top management, and be periodically reviewed by the operator. Also, very important, the clearly described lines of responsibility and accountability throughout the organization, reaching out to the top management, so that at every level of hierarchy, the staff members know to whom they shall report to any safety issue. And also the staff should be able to trace the reports and to receive feedback from the management on how the safety issue that they have reported will be addressed. As already mentioned, they must have a process and procedures for assessing risk, for identifying hazards, assessing risks, and mitigating those risks, and also train personnel in performing the risk assessments. The documentation is one key element of the management system, because it should be, all management processes must be described by the operator, and he also has to provide document control procedures in the ops manual. Also, the operator needs to have a compliance monitoring function within the organization. What does that mean? This means that somebody has to take care of internal audits and inspections. So somebody has to verify compliance with the rules. This may be the accountable this may be a dedicated person, a compliance monitoring manager, but also if it's a small organization, this function may be fulfilled by the accountable manager or the safety manager. Independent function means that independent compliance monitoring function means that those that are the auditors are not those that have the personnel, the internal audit and inspections are carried out, but personnel not responsible for the function, procedure, or product being audited. This is independent. Doesn't mean that you have to buy the services of somebody else in order to qualify for a independent. Of course, in the industry, there is a current practice, especially small industries, where they cluster this service. The compliance monitoring is clustered. Several small organizations use the services of a provider. They outsource this function, and it seems that this is a good solution for small organizations. Okay. I mentioned already the qualified and trained personnel. It's very important. who is complex? Complex is the operator who will operate over congested areas, long-range BVLOS that will carry dangerous goods and that will deliver cargo in urban areas. But also the competent authority will have the final say, and they will have to assess the size and complexity of the operator on a case-by-case basis. The privileges, the most important thing is that the operator will have the privilege to conduct the operation, to authorize by himself or herself the operation, where this, well, yeah, and without submitting a declaration or without applying for an authorization. So this is a huge saving in terms of financial and human resources. This is where the subcontractors, so it's reasonably expected that they will use subcontractors. So if the subcontractor is used, then the operator must manage the product, the service whatsoever under its own management system. What else? Two slides remains. A complex, so this is only valid for complex operators. They will have to have a safety committee. This is a high-level committee which monitors and controls the performance against targets, the action, if the action is taken in a timely manner, and the effectiveness of the safety management system. And also for complex operators, they must have one or more safety action groups. These are dedicated groups where only people who are responsible for a particular operation or area will be attending, and they will have to monitor the safety, assess the impact of the changes, and also ensure that the safety measures are taken in a timely manner. So this completes my presentation, I hope on time. Yeah. So I'm available for questions.
Okay, so let's put, let's put the view of the question. Yes, Irina, there is a first question about the majority of operators are small operators, sole traders. The look discriminates against the majority of operators if they are not eligible for this scheme.
Well, this is, I have already said, this is available for legal entities with significant resources to afford to build and establish a management system. Small operators who are not dealing with complex operations don't need this. They don't need, this is voluntary. This provides only savings for the complex operations spread across EU. So if you have operation here, operation in this member state, or in another member state, then in the next member state, you may consider having a look better solution than applying to each and every authority separately.
Yeah, I would like to add also that we are having then the standard scenario that will help the small organization not to do anything complex. And you need to have an organization that is able to assess risk. So it's not applicable for individual.
Hello, Adolfas Kuzborska, Lithuanian CAA. I want to go back to the homemade small drones, and according this regulation, who will make the technical evaluation and improvements for the drones, professional drones that are made by small manufacturers, which cannot go for the CA marking?
It's not from me.
I can take that question. The SORA will identify, or at the end identify the technical mitigations that are needed, and when there is an airworthiness assessment required, we expect that this is done by the organization under control of the national authority. But when there is a higher sail level, or there is a real robustness required for the flying aircraft, it might be helpful that the aircraft is certified and would get an EASA design approval. But for any lower risk or where there is no airworthiness related risk, there is no need to go there into detail.
Okay, we can take another question from the slide. Irina, is the LUC privilege to authorize its own operation transferable into another country of operations? What is the process?
Well, I wouldn't say this is transferable per se. This is recognizable, however. This reaches maybe further on, we will discuss the mutual recognition, but you have to know that in EU member states, this principle applies. So this principle is embedded in the basic regulation and all certificates. So the principle is of mutual recognition or recognition throughout EU is embedded in the basic regulation. So any certificate, approval, authorization, and so on and so forth is recognized. So the LUC holder, with the privilege of authorizing its own operations, is recognizable and may go and operate in another member state. Doesn't matter the member state who has issued the certificate.
Okay.
But the mitigation measures may be different in another member state. So what is the process in this case?
The process is that the operator, this is why we require the operator to have a sound management system and a very robust risk assessment. So this is what it's meant by risk. The operator has to develop the risk assessment for this particular operation, for the intended operation, and identify the measures which are applicable in this particular area. A territory. So this is he will be able to authorize because the authority has found him capable of developing a sound risk assessment, and he's able to, of course, implement the mitigating measures. No, he has not. No, not to reapply.
If the mitigation barriers are not exactly the same in one country as compared to another country, how could he get his authorization? Will he have to re-demonstrate the compliance with specific measures of a second country?
Not at all. Not at all.
So the privilege to authorize its own operations will be recognized totally in the other one?
Yeah, this is the idea.
I think it's not different from what exists for example, a DOA today. When you are approved in a country, when you have received a DOA, or when you have received a POA, these approvals are recognized throughout Europe. We have a standardization process that will apply, so there will be a way to make sure that this LUC is given in an appropriate manner. And second, perhaps what we should highlight is that the privileges, at least in my view, you will not get directly to the maximum privileges. You will start a bit small based on the experience and progress afterwards. So I don't think any difference in terms of the LUC compared to other kind of approval. Okay, but I realized that I made a wrong. I mean, I didn't choose right the approval. Sorry, I could say also POA, which is given by member states. So if we want to reopen, I would say the approval of the recognition, mutual recognition of POA, we can. Okay, but there was people that were patiently waiting. It was Bertrand and a gentleman over there.
Yeah, Bertrand from DGAC France. Yes, we share the concern that was expressed by my colleague from Airbus. In fact, I have to say that during the rulemaking tax, the main discussion focused on the open category, and the LUC was never really discussed or fully discussed. And at least we expect that maybe it should be considered to give some more time to have more detailed discussion on this concept. that could be interesting. But first, I would like to say that maybe the look as it's proposed will not fit most of the small and medium enterprise and operators that are currently operating in France, because the notion of safety management system, I'm not sure that all operators are very used to those concepts. And what is not clear in the NPA is what will be the extent of those privileges, because we do not really understand if, for example, holder of a LUC will be authorized, for example, to do major changes on unmanned aircraft that they will use for their operation. So I think that it could lead to very different interpretation from one member state to another one. And for example, it is clearly stated in the AMC that the complexity of the operation will be assessed on a case-by-case basis by each competent authority. So clearly, I think that there will be a question of harmonization on this. So let's discuss that further before maybe giving so large privileges. Thank you.
We will certainly welcome the discussion. The concept is perhaps not perfect yet, but we are certainly happy to take comments, and probably it's okay. It's a optional approval, so no one is obliged to have it. But what would be probably interesting is when people have looked at the look, then it could be interesting to get, in fact, some evaluation of how much or how many operators could really, see it as an advantage. That's probably something we would like to have some ideas about.
Yeah.
Okay, perhaps the last questions.
Okay, I have a question about the idea of the legal entities. Normally, all the EASA regulation involving aviation, they talk about organization. That is a much broader concept than the legal entities. Why not to consider to change this aspect that, in my opinion, works very well, also from EASA perspective? I mean that an organization is normally defined as also a group of legal entities that has the same procedure and that runs under the same guidance of the key figures. Why oblige, for example, the stakeholder to group under a single legal entities and not give them the freedom as an organization?
Well, we haven't mandated the. It's not mandatory to be under one umbrella, legal umbrella. It's not mandatory. This is not stipulated in the proposal. So we say this is organizational concept. So it does not to distinguish from individuals. This is the only message we say sent through the concept. We don't say that a number of entities cannot group together and apply for a look. This is not a limitation. That's it. No more questions, or?
Maybe we can address one of the online questions from Thomas. Is self-authorization a concept known in manned aviation? If not, why should it be allowed in this unknown sector? And it's a known concept. We have design organization approval where the organization gets privileges to authorize design changes that can be immediately implemented by maintenance organizations or even pilot owners in some cases. So it's a known concept. We also have at least elements in this aspect in the area of aerial work, where the organization releases and declares operation area where I'm not so familiar with DOA. And so it's a known concept. And it's transferred to a new sector, And the language you find in the requirements is not the DOA Part 21 language, it's SMS language, but the idea is the same, the concept is known, it's transferred to this sector. And of course, as mentioned by Yves, there will be a lessons learned, or there will be an introduction, and not every LUC applicant from day one on will get the full potential privileges that are possible. So there will be a stepwise introduction. But we see that there's a need to support the requirements by probably more guidance material, and of course any comments in this aspect are welcome if the rules and regulations are reasonable.
Okay, thank you. So now we are ready for the break. So we will reconvene at 3:15. Thank you.
Hallo.
Zu oft? Niemals zu oft. Nein, genügend oft. So soll es.